torn labrum is killing me.
Make it worth it.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Get a ride.
All right. Oh, wow. All right. Welcome to the Completely Unreasonable. And Greg, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our first live in-person guest.
Jeez, no pressure.
No pressure. There's none at all.
I'm glad I've slept one full night in the last 6 months. Thinking about this moment. Just
Yeah, that's it. So just to give you like kind of the idea and format of the show, like the whole idea is that like most of the things I've ever liked in my life have been unreasonable. From music, movies, people, things. We talked about Roger Bannister this movie, right? The idea of the 4-minute mile was unreasonable at one point. And so the goal is to talk to people that I think are either unreasonable, have unreasonable mindsets, skills, and can help us or other people lead an unreasonable life. And so that's why you're here.
okay. I accept.
Good. But what I did want, two things. You give your, I don't call it elevator pitch, but what do you do? Where are you? And then here's the big question: who are you?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Where am I?
Yep. Where are you located in the world? And then the big one
Yeah.
is who are you?
Yeah, I'm gonna plead the fifth on the third one, and the first one, I'm a writer and a trainer and a martial artist, maybe not in that order. And I've done each of those things for a long time. I've written the longest, done martial arts the second longest, and training the third longest. And in the past, I've ridden BMX professionally. I've ridden BMX poorly. I've done that since I was a young kid. I've booked hardcore my whole life. I've been involved in that since I was a young kid. I think all of that kind of falls in the unreasonable category. I think on any given day, I'm the best trainer in the world, and I'm also not a self-confident person. So for me to come anywhere near saying that means that I can prove it on anybody at any time. And outside of that, what I do on a daily basis is I run classes in Rochester, New York. That's where I am. And tinker with people's movement, make sure that they're doing exactly the best that they can do every single day. And that's it. I go home and go to sleep and do it again.
That's watch repeat. There's nothing wrong with that. So the question I want to start asking everybody, we've already asked the guy, just describe if you can. Well, we'll do it like this. What's the intense moment, if there is one, that brought you here, meaning to Wolf Brigade?
Well, I mean, training people in itself is a high improbability for me. There's no chance that made any sense. If the 18-year-old version of myself knew that I was going to be, watching people's hips for a living and teaching cops how to choke each other, I probably would have kicked my own ass. So that was highly improbable. I guess the inciting incident there would have been beginning martial arts and then realizing that that was more than just a hobby as soon as I found it the first time.
Yeah.
And then the strength and conditioning side of things really just fell in line. I've said it often, but worth repeating that I think that moving into strength and conditioning from martial arts has been the biggest benefit in moving into strength and conditioning at all.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a little box around it. I didn't have any preconceived notions about any of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to make people as good as they possibly could be, and I also understood from martial arts that there is no end to the nuance. And so once you can get people to buy into that, then there's no end to their progress in strength and conditioning. It's like the idea of one martial art being the king of all martial arts,
Yeah.
and how fast that myth can be dispelled. And then that's kind of how I address tools, it's how I address movement, it's how we address things like that. Of course, the barbell is always going to be the primary builder, the king in the kingdom, so to speak, but we found that kettlebells and maces are queen and knight, and without all three, you got a pretty sparse kingdom. It's not full. And so I think the inciting incident was martial arts. The second inciting incident was leaving California. The gym that we had there was excellent. My instructors were tremendous. best people for me I could have possibly found. But I knew that an idea like Wolf Brigade wasn't going to work in Long Beach, California, for many reasons, you know. And Rochester turns out a weird, mean city, and I definitely don't love it, but it let me do that thing, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I think maybe in my modern life, in my adult life, those were the two big tipping points.
Man, all right. So sometimes the environmental is the thing. That's what it sounds like when you talk about Rochester.
Yeah. I mean, Long Beach, of course, I've been in California many times. There's cost issues there. There's digestibility issues there. Things like that. What we had was phenomenal. Small martial arts gym with lineages to a bunch of different, really diverse, excellent martial arts. Catch wrestling, Thai boxing, Sabat, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Kali, and no dabbling. You know, my instructors were just tremendous at all of those things. They had found the best people in the world at all of those things because they truly wanted to mix the martial arts. And I will never stop saying how fortunate I am to have found that place at the time that I found it. It was perfect for me. And we were in early days CrossFit. So I got to learn an awful lot about what good training looked like from the few people within CrossFit that did things well, and then a ton about what bad training looked like from the rest. And so by even 2005, 2006, we had kicked to the curb the idea of just this, you know, death by attrition, you know, do all this stuff all the time. Because our purpose is we want it to be brutal. We want it to be better at fighting. So if you're doing 60,000 power cleans for time, followed by 250 burpees and a 25-mile run, there's no chance you're going to have anything left to do what you're actually supposed to be doing. And so that's when we started whittling down training to this like strategy over volume. And then I've just run with that ball for the last 16, 17 years.
With a purpose.
Yeah, purpose-driven. Yeah, detail-oriented, purpose-driven. And anyone that thinks that those aren't the best ways to build has never tried it.
Yeah, I mean, when I found you, right, the things that got me was the detail-oriented. And it was the fact that it was purpose-driven. I mean, it's fascinating for me because kind of dabbling and playing around with all the different things, being exposed to some, like one of my early exposures, love him or hate him, was Mark Twight. Like Mark was super good with me when I was a young dude.
I have very distinct feelings about Mark on both sides of that coin for the same reasons.
I can imagine. But he was one of those guys that when like early internet I wrote me back and was like, do this. This is helpful.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
He found the same disillusionment with CrossFit that I found. He had just found it earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so coming across you, it was very much like, and we've talked about it too, like even my love with like, I'm not as deep in the hardcore and punk, but it's always been a love of mine, especially for a kid who grew up in an area where you're not supposed to be like, just black kid who likes hardcore punk.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I mean, and as absolutely absurd as it is, like that's still even kind of a little bit of a thing.
Oh, yeah, 100 still is, yeah.
But meanwhile, in the late 80s, early 90s, I mean, it was like a novelty.
Yeah.
You know, it was tremendous, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we can go down that rabbit hole too, man. But it was one of those things where, like, you know, seeing you had that, like, that feel to it, like, oh, this is authentic, this is real, this is, and again, like, purpose matters. Like, I'm not in that space anymore, where for me, purpose is the main driver this year, or the last few years, but doing and being a martial artist and a jiu-jitsu player for years, it's been like, oh, okay, this matters, this works. It's just a thing we talked about before, to get off the ground. Like, I was so amazed, and it's such a simple concept, but most people just
And honestly, it's very similar to the mace in the sense that if you just try and, you know, you just go for it, chances are pretty good that even if you're a good athlete, you haven't thought out any details, it's going to trip you up. You're going to get frustrated, and then if your attention span is short, and you're already strong enough, then you're gonna push it to the side.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's kind of the ones that really see that if something trips you up, it's probably trying to help you. And those are the ones that circle back, you know, and that's really what we found with pretty much everything. We get visited by a lot of people who've been through the ringer with everything else. They've trained a million different ways. They've been really compromised positions in their life or their health or something like that. So it also became a really interesting game of if we can rebuild or build these people with nothing, or that are totally broken down or banged up or whatever, think how easy it is to put that 1 or 2% on the 99%. So eventually, when I did start bringing a lot of what we do to higher level folks, it sharpens the edge to this like razor.
Yeah.
And it's easy because we've taken it from the other equation of, you know, okay, we've got a 50-year-old woman with very little athletic background that was formerly obese and a drug addict and had enormous amounts of self-confidence issues and mobility issues and all this kind of stuff, and now she's been with us for 11 fucking years and can squat 265 pounds and swing a 12-kilogram mace any day of the week. You know, I could tell those stories all day long. You know, we've got a 61-year-old dude that's got a 106-pound Turkish get-up on each side that had never lifted a kettlebell until he started training with us.
Yeah.
And that's just detail stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we don't train these, you know, thoroughbred, you know, born with a six-pack CrossFit folks very often because they don't think they need us. Mm-hmm. But what they're looking at right now is like a tiny footprint of their giant life. You know. And I'm thinking, okay, if you want to do anything that resembles what you're doing now in 15 or 20 years, don't wait 15 years to find us. You know, just swallow that ego and.
You know, it's interesting because like you'd think with high performers that finding that half percentage point, that 1 percentage point, is where you are looking, and I think it is. But then it's one of those things where it's like this is easy to write off, it's easy to overlook, and I'm already here. You know, I've seen it. I saw it in my last profession, right? Like there are guys that, oh, why do I need that?
Yeah.
And then if you can get it introduced, and all of a sudden everybody's singing the praises, but it's like that piece from like why to belief, it's such a vast delta.
Yeah.
But it's for me, it's hard to understand because I say container to tier. It's for more than just porn and cat videos, right?
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting when proof kind of becomes insurmountable, and people will still cast aspersions or say, oh, you know, it's proof, but you know, it's not important for me, or something like that. And it's like, well, that's a source of frustration for me because we've done consulting with high level places. You know, I worked with the Performance Institute when Bo was there for several years, and it's really, really insane what people who say they want to be at the absolute top of the field won't do. And it confuses me. It also frustrates me a lot because all it would take is a little bit of investment, and the return is tremendous. And a lot of times it's easy to say, oh, you know, how are they so small if they have all this great information? That's an entirely different rabbit hole. Yeah. Often the people that are singing the right songs have the least amount of listeners, and that's the case until, you know, years after they've stopped contributing or whatever the case is. So we don't intend to be that, but that's definitely where we've fallen into. If I was a normal looking dude with really digestible way of speaking and use some of this common pop culture disposable vernacular, we would have 1 million followers. You know, if I would put these tremendously talented, brutal fucking women that train at our gym in some scanty clothing to lift, you know, 150-pound kettlebells, we'd have 1 million followers. You know, but fuck that side of society and fuck that side of the world. That's not what we do. You know.
And as somebody who started to find all these things kind of simultaneously, it's almost, I think, a little bit of the inverse by what you're saying. I found when learning powerlifting and also at the same time starting to learn how to use a mace and play with mace, I found the progression of that to be so empowering that translated to everything else in terms of starting to get that under control and starting to feel like what it meant to control that movement.
Well, I mean, detail begets detail.
Right.
If you think that honing in your technique or your efficiency at getting off the ground and moving a mace that's heavy enough to be useful and throwing a strike and controlling a body and drawing a weapon or using a knife or something like that are different, then you might not actually know anything about any of those things. Because when I see the people with the most proficiency, and we're very fortunate that a lot of them are near us all the time.
Yeah.
We have high-level tacticians in our presence all the time. We have high-level martial artists in our presence all the time. And I watch one edge sharpen the other to the point that, you know, it's our beginner level grapplers just don't feel like beginners. You know, from a technique standpoint, sure, of course, there's stuff that they're missing,
Yeah.
but they're so physically terrifying that it's like, well, okay, yeah, you're playing nice because the goal is learn.
Yeah.
But if I said, okay,
Go.
destroy me, because you have to. I mean, and we've seen it. We brought them to a couple competitions as beginners and things like that, and it was.
You can definitely. I mean, I haven't, you know, been played with your guys, but like you can definitely feel. There's gyms I've been to, you know, traveling around and doing jiu-jitsu, and you grab a white belt and you're like, this is not normal.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
understand. Like,
And there's a ton of patting on the back to that. I mean, that
Yeah.
means their trainers have been putting them in the right stuff. They're doing the right stuff.
Yeah.
You're not simply just lifting really heavy weights and eating a ton of food. You know, there's so many components that go into being scary in those realms. Of course, you know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, you. I think we have been around enough. Like when you lock up with a guy, you know, like you know what the next 3, 4, 5, whatever minutes look like.
Yeah.
You know, even from a skill perspective, even if you can trump the guy from a skill perspective, it's still like this is not going to be fun.
Well, and I'll highlight two people who I love this feedback from is Bo Sandoval and Tyler Minden. You know,
Yeah.
two accomplished martial artists,
Yeah.
deep water strength and conditioning professionals. Bo's been working with us and really diligently performing the daily program for several years now, and has consistently touted the fact that he feels stronger in grappling than he ever has, and all this kind of stuff. And Tyler, he's been doing the program for a shorter time, you know, kind of practicing our details for a shorter time, but was a consummate professional fighter
Yeah.
that is now starting to say, okay, I'm really understanding what my strength can be and mobility and things like that. And it's like, man, it's tremendous. You know, I mean, I take all positive feedback seriously from people that understand deep water
Yeah.
in both the training realms and the teaching realms and the competition realms. That's just really insightful, important stuff.
What's the thing for Wolf Brigade? And I know you've touted some of the clients or guys that you guys have at your gym. But what's the one for you where you're like, I know what we're doing is right? Whether it's a story or a group or whatever.
Oh, geez. One person, one era.
Your choice, man.
So I mean, we've the woman that I mentioned is a big one. That's a relatively specific story,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to dissect a ton of personal stuff past that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we get these troubled people with no experience, and,
Mhm.
and you start putting this high level detail into them, and they start realizing how important it is, and it almost starts letting you kind of re-engineer what they were as a physical person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, okay, you're looking at this thing, and you're like, okay, I understand. You know, those are all the components of a person. But when you start plugging everything in together, you know, we think about it as tensile strength. We call it
Mhm.
insulation. And they start moving everything together. You know, the midline gets strong. The extension cords do what they're supposed to do. And all of a sudden, you can really kind of just put these people on anything. And it doesn't matter if they're 25 and have never been injured, or if they're 50 or 55 and have very little training.
Yeah.
They're not going to lift the same weights at the same speed, but the accuracy is going to be there.
Yeah.
So I think that the turning points for us with that were as much as we've gotten flack from it from very high level individuals that you would probably not believe if I said it. Re-engineering kettlebell lifting was the big deal there, because there was nothing that was a suitable companion or accessory or whatever you want to call it to barbell lifting.
Yeah.
There's the barbell, and then there's machines, and there's dumbbells, of course, but dumbbells are phenomenal but limited in
Yeah.
some ways, and kettlebells are phenomenal but were also limited in some ways. The ground to shoulder element of it was too light to be useful. We found that out. We reached structural capacities at the previous kettlebell lifting positions, like the internally rotated thing that we all believe in.
Mhm.
Eventually, we were like, well, our people can lift more than this. The limiting factor is this.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you don't want to be here. Why would you arm lock yourself at the bottom of a lift? Covering the internal rotation with the mace stuff and everything anyway. So then we started tinkering with this pistol grip. We started tinkering with these stacked hand grips. I engineered the kettlebell back squat, so we had a posterior accessory for weightlifting and things like
Yeah.
that. And that's when everything just started building like crazy. And so, as far as a moment or a person, the couple people that I mentioned are a few of the highlights for me. There's been a million of them though. I taught a kid with Asperger's to kickbox. That was pretty fucking awesome. But as far as like big overarching stuff, I think the re-engineering of kettlebell stuff is what, you know, that's what made the three-headed dragon. You know, I mean, the barbell can now be complemented and supplemented with heavy enough kettlebells to be useful. You know, if the barbell's off the table for something, the strategy of kettlebell lifting is able to replace it for certain people. If we're doing a hinge day and it's a standard deadlift, we can kettlebell swing, good morning, and then base good morning to skin that entire pattern at really heavy, sensible weights and schemes. I mean, we have. I don't think there's anyone in the room that can't kettlebell swing their body weight for 5 or 7 reps. We've got people that can do far crazier stuff than that. I mean, you know, there are some of the stronger girls in our gym can get their body weight of a kettlebell to the front rack and squat it there, put it in the back rack, squat it there, goblet squat. You know, we've tinkered with it enough and added enough detail, and we build midline well enough that you know that they can be a focus group for us with very little risk. It's like practicing martial art with a lot of detail versus just sparring. You know, we always say, you know, unless you're a real legendary asshole, no one spars on their first day of martial arts class. You know, it's the same with strength and conditioning. You're not going to throw someone in and say, oh, you know, you weigh 160 pounds, you've never trained. Let's try this 160-pound kettlebell swing. But once you're watching someone do this, and their deadlift is 350 or whatever the case is, then you can say a sensible percentage of X to build would be Y. A nonsensical percentage would be 53 pounds for men. You know what I mean? If you've got a 350-pound deadlift or more or whatever, how many thousands of kettlebell swings at 44 or 55 pounds are you going to have to do to actually make your ass stronger? So I think from like a umbrella, it was the engineering of modern kettlebell lifting, and then the May stuff. Man, I mean, I fell in love with that the second I saw it, but you know, there was very little detail attached to it.
Yeah.
And so to be systematic and to improve martial arts, it has to have martial detail. My opinion, my experience. You know, you're not going to improve something that's martial with a casual process.
Yeah.
And so the base, we just kind of started putting all those boxes in order and checking them.
It's been fantastic for me. I have not really made a full return to the match, but it's been my plan. So I can only speak for what it's done for me, and your coaching has done for me. Every time I coach, I call you or text you for details. It's the reason that I was initially called to you, right? Like before meeting you personally, like it was just like, oh, okay, this guy has something that you don't necessarily get from most coaching, right? You don't necessarily get a lot of thoughtfulness in how or why you're approaching it. Even from the people who are coaching their quote unquote tactical fitness or whatever the buzzword is, right? You're looking for a purpose. What you're typically getting is big broad brushstrokes.
Yeah.
Which
my assessment of that is a tough one. There is an awful lot of fault and failure in those worlds. And I think part of it is that they understand what they want to build, but they haven't put eyes on enough bodies and tinkered with enough positioning to understand how to actually build it. I helped with a tactical group a couple months ago, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because I don't want to make it seem like I'm talking shit. But I was watching them after 3 days of work, and there was zero movement accuracy. And so the first thing that I did in the tiny amount of time that I had with them is we made sure that they were actually making the shapes. And not everyone makes the shapes the exact same way, but everyone makes the shapes the exact same way. You just have to get them there. So minus these kind of micro adjustment movement strategies, you're not really going to get out of any athlete what you actually can. And that's the tough stuff, because that's the non-glamorous stuff.
Yeah.
If I'm watching someone squat, and we just did this last week, a group came to us from Connecticut, a kid was having real trouble with his squat, and he'd been having trouble for years. We tinkered with it for 5 minutes, and it was all set. And it's really just a matter of watching someone and saying, okay, I'm watching what your body's doing. If if you widen your feet an inch and turn them out half an inch and brace yourself properly, you're going to find what you were looking for range-wise. Your torso is going to stay a little bit more neutral, and you're going to have power at the bottom. That level of detail is present with every single physical movement. But if you haven't watched enough to assess it and adjust it, you're not going to get this end product. That's been the biggest trouble for me to watch is people that need that fitness and that capacity and that detail the most are often the least detailed in pursuing and applying it. And I don't necessarily fault them for that. They've got a ton of other stuff to do, but it's in the same way that you know, I've been shooting for many years, but outside of helping people that I know privately become safe and proficient with basic firearms stuff, I'm going to teach a firearms class.
Yeah.
It would be reckless.
Oh, that's true.
So, of course you do. So anyway, but that's how I think about strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
People don't think about strength and conditioning that way because they just think, well, you should just be able to lift. You should just be able to do fitness, work out, right?
Yeah.
But
There's an overall like lack of movement quality. We're just talking about regular people these days. Like I've referenced it before. Like the Joint Chiefs had a thing where they're saying basically in the next 25 years we won't be able to stay in the military due to physical fitness, right? And so if you think about that, like what are we saying? Yeah, there's an obesity problem. There's a bunch of other problems, but when you see it live, it turns out to be like, yeah, I always liken it to when you're grappling. And like, so I say I have some guy in side control, and I tell him move his right foot this way, and he does it the other way. Or I say, take your left hand and do this, and he has no awareness of his own body. And so, you know, listening to you talk, it just kind of reinforces, for me, it reinforces that. That's what
it's sometimes the patience of just learning how to learn. People, you know, people want the crops without the rain, as the famous quote goes.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, that could not be more true than with people that need to apply it in the deepest water.
Yeah.
And that's troublesome. You know, we see it up by us. We work with a lot of law enforcement up there and fire and things like that, and they're talking about like either lowering or removing the baseline physical standards from the entry process, things like that. And it's like, you know what? While I understand that eventually if a bar continues to lower, you have to address it. Do you address it by removing it altogether? I mean, the answer, of course, should be no to that. But a lot of times it's time, resources, and things like that. But most of the time, I think it's just patience and interest.
Yeah.
They think if they can have someone gut out a 10-mile run, that they're fit enough to go try and arrest me if I actually go crazy. And I don't think I agree.
Yeah.
So how do you do that then? How do you lower the barrier of entry for folks?
We don't. And what you do is you bring them to your bar by addressing details in a way that are scalable for everyone. We've had people come in with nothing to offer and end up with considerable physical skill sets. And it's just a matter of also understanding what quality product-driven scaling is. Scaling is going to look different for everyone. But a lot of times scaling is looked at as, well, a lot of times because CrossFit made it so, scaling is looked at as a demotion.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things that I really started side-eyeing, is these motherfuckers that couldn't do anything outside of exactly what they were doing are looking down on people because they can't lift this particular weight on the bar. You know, meanwhile, I'm a kid that came from you know, BMX and hardcore and things like that, and I was fortunate enough that the people that I looked up to were touchable, they were findable. You know, I would go to BMX demos to watch these people that I had this like total idolatry at the time of, and they would walk over and give me stickers and talk to me and pat me on the back. You know, this is a story I've shared before, but I think the first show that we ever played was with Sick of It All. And that band was amazing to us, you know, throughout our entire time, booking bands, playing with bands, traveling. They were like just these relatable folks. So the idea of someone being better than me, or someone being better than these others in the group because they could lift a little more weight on a bar, like what kind of fucking clown are you? You know, you're like the king of the clowns, if that's really what you believe. So when we started retinkering with training, it really became this issue of we are going to be the antithesis of that, and I'm going to get anyone to do anything they need to in a way that gets them to do this other version.
Yeah.
And so you just reel it all the way back down in. And we have scaling that, I mean, I believe is extremely sharp and nearly infinite.
Yeah. I think, man, I mean, you said a mouthful. First of all, like, I just had an unlock when you were talking. Like, no, like, seriously, there's something to that aspect of, like, being able to reach out and touch people who you look up to, or they have a skill set or something that you're not envious of, but you want.
It seems intangible, but
Right.
when you realize it's tangible.
Because I think we all have stories, and now that you said that, like, right, like you said, like, oh, well, I could talk to these people and they're cool to me and everything else, and I've heard, your version of that, and I know what my version is, and it's like, oh, this is the thing that led me to the next step, instead of being like, like my very first powerlifting meet, I remember being like, if these guys are dicks, I'm done. But it was the opposite, so I continued, and it's very much, I think it's, something it's a big statement, like I said, and I don't think any of us really realize it, but like, how often is that small interaction, the interaction or the ripple that leads to the next thing?
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be everything. And what it does is it also removes that kind of hero worship barrier.
Yeah.
So if you stay a hardworking and humble person, you can be in any level environment and feel totally comfortable and normal there, because you're no longer looking up at this person, you're looking across at this person. And I mean, I think that's served me well my entire life, but until it hasn't. Some people want to be looked up to in those ways.
Oh, yeah.
And when you don't, then they realize that the perception of you and the reality of you are different.
Yeah.
And then they push you off to the side. And we talked about a few people in this conversation that have done that to me.
Yeah.
It's the magic trick thing too, right?
Yeah, it's so. The thing we've been chatting a lot about is like, usually use it in reference to competition. Like, the only difference between competition is the fact that it's magic, right? Once you see behind the magic trick, there's no longer magic. And so, I think that's kind of like what we're seeing. And to kind of further ask and say something, for me, that's what martial arts was.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And it feels like a magic trick that you can control a little tiny bit after a while.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what is happening here? I mean, my fascination with martial arts will never end, but it's incredible.
Yeah, same. I remember being a kid. So I started off with like Hapkido, and so I did Hapkido for
Joe Sung.
Yeah, and so 10, 12 years of that, but I remember looking at these guys, these brown belts, these black belts, and being like, oh, that's attainable. Whereas like in my other side of my life, like basketball and other sports, being like, and then there's not really a person to be like, like I can show up at the end of the game and maybe get an autograph, but I can't listen to this guy tell another guy, like, hey man, when you do your kick, turn your foot this way. And there's like that small bit of magic that ends up not being magic, because you're like, oh, I see it. So it just kind of blew my mind.
Well, and that's kind of the same experience you're describing when you're making those small tweaks for people. Turn your foot this way, adjust this, that. It's these little things that you see that resonate on such a level.
That's exactly right. I mean, we talk about it as the moment of clarity,
right?
And it's the moment of clarity with both how you're moving, when you actually move and implement correctly, and it all of a sudden cooperates for you. You felt the moment of clarity with the mace when you were just tinkering with it. It went from looking like it might offset you to you making a couple of those excellent adjustments, and then all of a sudden it's like you could have swung the thing 20,000 times.
Yeah.
I mean, the moment of clarity is whatever it is, but it's sometimes the perception of what you're doing. It's sometimes the practice of what you're doing, and then sometimes it's the actual tool that you're doing it with. And then once those things start to all work together, then it's like, man, you just watch these. And I always refer to the people in our room, but you watch them train, and there's days that I'm standing there watching a group that I've articulated the board, we've covered the details, and they already know the process. And I'm just watching it, and I'm like, this is just not happening elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because I've been elsewhere. I've been everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when you know that, you've pulled that curtain back in that way, and they can see it too. That's the most fun. When you can see it land on someone, or like a micro adjustment get someone to perform something that they were this close, that they were really hoping for and hunting for. I mean, that's the coolest.
That light bulb moment. I like,
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And the same with martial arts. I mean, the light bulb moments for the first however many years of training, it's like they're daily.
Mm.
But then you get so used to them and almost like addicted to them in a way.
Yeah.
That then if what you want is progress, you keep hunting them forever. They get harder to find, but they are no less enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, I remember like starting jujitsu, I couldn't hold anybody inside control. And I don't remember the guy's name. He's from American Top Team. It was when I was traveling, and he was like, "Hey, do this," and he told me how to kind of like manipulate my body, to somebody's chest.
Yeah.
And I was like, "That's it." But it was a step, and I got it. And I was like, "Oh man, this is so." And then, like you said, like you just keep hunting it more and more. Like this is I'm saying this thing all the time. I'm always in search of, and that's typically what it is. It's either those moments of like, or it's the moment of like where it's like everything else falls away, which is also something I found in martial arts, right? It's like, or even training. If things get heavy enough, the consequences are deep enough, you're not.
Yeah, the focus has to laser in, or
Exactly.
something bad's gonna happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Instant accountability is what we call that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no choice.
Or self-correcting, depending on how well it goes.
Self-correcting.
That's usually how I learn best, is self-correcting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, how long? Well, let me ask this: how long have you guys been running North Brigade? I don't even know.
2008. I moved back to Rochester, New York in May of 2008, and we began running classes in the park at a public school playground at 6 p.m. every night on May 17th, 2008. And so for the first little while, we ran a class every night at 6. And, I had the tools that I drove back in my car from California.
Yes.
It was a couple maces, a couple ropes, like a few light to medium kettlebells, and I knew enough people in the area that people showed up, and it kind of developed into what it was. And as strange as it was, even though we had a couple of cops there, we had a couple of criminals there, we had a couple of normal people there, we got kicked off of this kid's playground and told not to return by the school board, and
Yeah.
someone who was dressed up as a cop. And so then we moved to a different playground across the way, and a few months later, same result. And it was we had these high level folks and also these kind of terrifying folks, and it's like what you would want on a playground at
Right.
6 p.m.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Those
This is not the opposite.
anyone in the proximity was safer than they've ever
Right,
been
right. Yeah.
at that moment. And so we got bounced from these two places, and then it was getting towards fall, and then we got a little teeny tiny room in a building in Rochester called the Hungerford that I'd been in some iteration since a long time before that, since
Yeah.
before I moved to California. That's where we had Coalition at the time, which was our bike company and our printing company, and then Hell on Earth, which is that brand that we have. And then across from that was this little teeny tiny room, and we rented that for the first Wolf Brigade. It was 550 square feet, and we had people in there training with maces and kettlebells and stuff. So the beginning was important, but certainly not glamorous.
I mean, so talking about a show that's called the Completely Unreasonable Tour, I think, like, for me, that's perfect, right? Because a lot of people will be like, well, everyone sees the outcome, or they want to see their outcome, which is, I want this gym or this thing that looks like this. And that first step of being in a playground doesn't occur.
Well, and the other interesting thing for me to figure out was the fact that I was going from Long Beach to this well-appointed gym with
Yeah.
beautiful weather and garage doors on both sides of the room, and proper mats and actual weightlifting tools, and,
Yeah.
things like that. So it would have been really easy to look at that as a significant demotion. And I've thought about it a lot, but honestly, it's you can't demote purpose, and
Yeah.
really that's what it was. Is the purpose did not change from the fact that we had this nice room in California to the park, or this little teeny tiny room where you couldn't adjust the heat.
Yeah.
In New York, it was the same. The purpose was the same.
When I hear that, we're having this conversation with a buddy of ours named Brian. He recently was talking about it. And a lot of people talk about it now. He's rallying against it. The whole motivation discipline over motivation, right? And everybody's saying it's more discipline. And what I hear is that your motivation isn't this fleeting flash in the pan, what people typically ascribe to motivation, where it's like, I listen to this music and I'm pumped up.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And to me, when I hear motivation, it's more akin to purpose. It is purpose.
Yeah, it's both. I mean,
Yeah.
Discipline and motivation hold hands.
They have to.
And they don't let go until one is going to the wayside.
Yeah.
You know, I've never really looked at them as separate.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of one of those internet discussions people get into because they don't have anything else to say.
I think it's one of those things I find a lot of issue with it, because when you find people at their lowest who are trying to make their way up one rung, it seems like it's not helpful.
Mm-hmm. What falls into that category of what I was saying before too, right? It's just something where it's like you're being a dick. It's like what yeah.
And I mean, there's it also kind of gives the impression that everyone is the same.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, discipline for some, it's almost just a natural state of being. Some people are just automaton in a way that they can get up at whatever time, do whatever thing, whatever. I mean, the fact is that people are wired differently.
100%.
And there have been periods of time in my life, I mean, it's been most of my entire life, but I've been relatively disciplined. But there's been times where that has been a tumultuous thing where it would have been easy to quit it. And then the motivation of, whatever you're really driving towards and why has to kind of push it along. So thinking about one succeeding without the other, for me, that doesn't equate. I mean, I can wake up at whatever time and eat whatever I need to know that it's going to get me what I need from a results standpoint in training that day or in helping people that day or something. But if I take out that motivational piece of revenge on society is this overarching umbrella, it's not going to go the way it would go otherwise.
I just wanted to hit it because it to me, that's all I heard. Like you're saying, like we went from this setup, which was what people would want, to a playground. And if you don't know anything about Rochester, it's cold.
Yeah,
Like,
man. The weather sucks. The people are mean.
You
I mean,
know.
man, it's nice for a few days a year, and
Yeah.
there's some nice people there, I suppose.
And so to go through that, to me, that's what I hear. It's the purpose is greater. It's greater.
Yeah, and not to try and romanticize it or mystify it or something, but sure. I mean, there's I've been down. I had a lot of really crazy shit happen to me when I was a kid, and although most of it I would rather erase because I would prefer not to have the baggage from it. It makes it really hard to quit things that feel important to others, because I feel like I have a lot of fucking debt to pay, and even that, that's not much discipline. That's not going to get me up at whatever time. It's a motivational issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But it's not a petering candle. I mean, it's stayed lit for however long. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
I'm listening. So,
Yeah.
I know you were-
All right, man.
All right.
Appreciate
Keep
you.
chatting. Yeah.
I mean, that's how I've always looked at it. That's how I've always thought of it. So to hear you talk about it, and then to kind of get the more, I've heard a little bit about the backstory. I didn't realize that, like where it was coming from. I knew you got to Rochester. I didn't know it was 2008. So for me, that's I think it's a big deal.
At this point, it feels like it's been a long time and a short time. I don't feel like we're anywhere near where we can get, but some days I look at it and I'm like, holy cow, that's a considerable life for a tiny, quirky business that has been stopped at every turn.
Yeah.
And honestly, the reasons we've been stopped have never had to do with the quality of what we offer or how we present it or who we are as people. So then it becomes kind of easy to say, okay, yeah, these barriers keep setting up, but we're gonna push through them because it's not like we're being stopped because we suck.
Yeah.
Or it's not like we're being stopped because what we're presenting is garbage or it's not helping people or something like that. We're being I don't know, targeted or stopped or slowed down for external reasons based on people that find what we do intimidating or undigestible or or something like that. And then what do you do when that happens? Well, you push harder.
Yeah.
You know, if you're rattling the cages and they're making noise, that means you're almost out.
Yeah.
You know.
So the other thing, when you talked about like getting kicked out and moving to a different place, like how does, and if it doesn't, it's fine, but like how does hardcore translate into that? Because for me, that's what it is.
That's such a perfect question, man. I mean, you know, there was a skate video many years ago called "Kicked Out of Everywhere."
Yeah.
I've been kicked out of everywhere.
And
You know, I mean, by the time I was 16, I'd run from every cop in the city on a BMX bike. You know,
Yeah.
In my entire life, I've done things, and they've never been evil-minded or anything like this, but my entire life, I've done things that I wasn't supposed to be doing in places I wasn't supposed to do them.
Yeah.
And so the reality is, you know, that was a little bit of a bitter pill because we liked that playground. But what are we gonna do? Go cry about it?
Yeah.
You know, booking hardcore shows. I mean, there were times where we would lie through our teeth to book an Annunciation Hall to put a show in where we had Hell's Angels as security guards, and there is no chance in the world that should have gone well.
Yeah.
But it did, and when they found out towards the end of the night, it was too late.
Yeah.
You know, did we get invited back? No, but mission accomplished. You know, we made what we needed to make. You know,
It's, for me, it's perfect because that's what I think. When I think about hardcore, when I think about like getting kicked out, I think of like setting up out front and playing loud.
yeah, that's exactly it. And it's the same with BMX. We were never, you know, destroying private property and smashing people's stuff or anything like that. We're riding BMX bikes, we're jumping on stuff, we're jumping over stuff.
Yeah.
And at that time, especially early on, in the 90s and things like that, it wasn't digestible. It wasn't on TV. It wasn't this kind of pop culture phenomenon that it is now. So every cop that had nothing to do would go target BMX and skateboarding. And, you know, the reality is we were young and didn't want to get in trouble and
Yeah.
knew the city real well, and that would be it. You know, that's it. So it was a perfect question. The getting kicked out of the playgrounds, had I not had a lot of those experiences, I mean, shows getting shut down and
Yeah.
all this, that was all very real at the time. It's not. I don't know that the homogenization of all of it isn't fun to watch now.
Yeah.
But now it's more like TV for me. It's not like, it doesn't feel as like real. No one is going to come in and turn your show off now. You know.
There's no consequence.
Less so.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are places like some of my friends in LA, man, I've been watching some of the stuff they're doing in the LA River Basin and stuff, and it's incredible. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I watch it and I'm like, that is it. You know, like they understand it. There's hundreds and hundreds of people and bands playing, and there's like, you see like a police chopper overhead, and people are shooting off fireworks and stuff like this, and it's like, they really, really get it. There has to be an outlaw aspect to this stuff. And even in strength and conditioning now, I mean, some of the group that came to visit us a couple of weeks ago, they were very, very cool. I believe they learned a lot. They got to watch one of the group classes, and they're trainers, so they got to see how that group operates. It's unlike anything I've seen. And one of the questions that one of the girls asked was, you know, does the environment in there intimidate people or turn them away or shake them up? And I said, well, sure, you know, at first, but that's the purpose.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it doesn't shake them up, and nothing shakes them up. And you're developing this kind of adaptability in this, you know, it's like you're just conditioning yourself for a different type of thing.
It's
You're conditioning yourself for weightlifting, but you're conditioning yourself for minor league chaos, wherever it may present itself.
It's inoculation.
It's stress inoculation.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as when they play like, you know, terrible death metal in shoot houses and stuff. I mean, it's I get it, you know.
Yeah, it's been a significant amount of time in a small village listening to the baby cry. So
I'm not laughing because that's funny.
so, man, so the other thing, or not other thing, but to kind of ride that tail coat, how important back in the day and now is hardcore to you?
Man, I mean, it and BMX were and are just foundational. Like
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's tough to watch some elements of hardcore because it's so easy to see that it's pretendinitis. You know, they're looking at a band, they're trying to be that band, and I get it, but that band was that band.
Mhm.
And especially having been fortunate enough to be there for a lot of that, it's unfair.
Yeah.
You know, like when you see it and feel it in those ways, it would be impossible to replicate.
Yeah.
You can't pretend. From a philosophical standpoint, both of those things gave me everything. You know, I mean, perspective on being a purposeful reject was instilled from a very, very young age. And unless you have a real sense for that, you're going to get discouraged every time someone puts you down.
Yeah.
And it never feels good. I've literally had my idols and people that I look up to the most in the world put me down in every field I've been in. I'm not being a crybaby about it, but it's unusual.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people that I looked up to in BMX since I was a young boy that once I worked in the industry and made a lot of headway in the industry, dedicated pages of catalogs to making fake interviews with me to making me look like a clown.
Wow.
Other people I looked up to in BMX were instrumental in trying to get me fired from the big bike company I ran in California.
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning was the same thing. Greg Glassman put my fucking print shop out of business in 2009 because we had a handshake partnership that he reneged on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff in those realms too. That's not usually worth talking about, but it's worth at least noting.
Yeah.
The growing up in hardcore and BMX are the only reasons that I've never folded up and ran away when those things went down. Because what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You're gonna kill me? I don't think so. And honestly, short of that, I don't really know what it would take. You know, I've had a lot of really great experiences within BMX and hardcore. I've had rough ones, and they all kind of insulate you for whatever comes next. Following those paths teach you an awful lot when they're forming. You know, BMX was still formative in the late 80s and early 90s when I found it. It was like, I guess if you want to look at like people say first wave and second wave of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe second wave of BMX, maybe second wave of hardcore. Like the first stuff, I was just at the tail end of, and I got to catch some of it, but not a ton. But then like that second wave was like when we got to see it all.
Yeah.
People had started figuring it out. It really started evolving fast. And I was just fortunate enough to be around it and really just, we hunted it. You know, when we started going to contests and shows and stuff like that, we would go wherever.
Yeah.
You know, you would find a flyer and you would drive there.
It's funny, man, because like I think that's not to or to sound old. Like I think that's one of the things that I do kind of miss about music and just certain things is like that hunt.
Absolutely.
It's now it's like, oh, well, I can just type it in and it's there.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like I talked to you about it last time. Like I used to carry around this sleeve of CDs.
Yeah.
You know, and it had this music on it that I can't search on the internet and find.
Yeah.
And some guy stole it. And I literally put up flyers in Sierra Vista, Arizona, and I was like, "Hey man, I just want my CDs back. Keep this head unit. Like I just want I can't get those back."
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. The two just tied in for me. So
It's an immediate tie-in. There was an element of earning it that made
Yeah,
everywhere
exactly.
you landed
Yeah.
feel great.
Yeah.
Even if you got there and it sucked, and that was often the case.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to romanticize it like every show or anything BMX-wise we did was awesome. A lot of times the shit fell flat on its face. But if you'd hunted it down, there'd been an adventure, an experience on the way, you know, and it's I'm not saying that's not here now, but that's part of the reason I drive around so much
Yeah.
instead of, you know, flying wherever other is I like that. I like that little hunt. And it's different. I'm not gonna say I don't enjoy putting an address on my phone and not having to worry about my terrible sense of direction.
yeah,
But like when, you know, we would communicate with people from other states, you'd write them a letter, you'd send them a sticker, you'd send them a flyer. We had this thing called a phone dialer that mimicked the coin sound in a payphone.
oh yeah.
You remember those?
Mhm.
And so like we'd be booking a tour, and instead of spending, you know, hundreds of dollars on the payphone calls, you just sit and put the fake coins in the thing. And the biggest, you know, comedy at the time was eventually the operator would get out and be like, we're gonna need just you to stay on premises. And it was like, well, I mean, clearly,
Yeah.
we're not gonna do that.
I'll be
Yeah.
there. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Oh, man. To be respectful of time, we're going
of course, man, yeah.
But I wanted to kind of wrap this up with a thing, because I think when we talk about being reasonable and trying to do whatever life is for you, the things that are important are often things that are on the fringes. We kind of talked about like hardcore, talked about strength and conditioning and martial arts. What's a thing, even if it's just for the day that you value, that, I don't know, I can have a billboard talk about what we would say, what it is.
That's funny you mention that. If the world is ever short-sighted enough to give me adult money, that thought crime notion is going to be on a ton of billboards, and what it's going to be on is it'll say something like that, just basically commit thought crime, but then underneath it will be some purposeful sentence about something, whether it be like a singular sentence about a relevant cultural topic or something like that. But what we found with marketing is that Stark at least gets people's attention, and if they like it or hate it, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
But you're at least gonna read it. We started making that sticker, and that was our first sticker. We started making that sticker in 2008. Little did I know that it would be about prophecy of where the world would go. In 2008, we already saw on the billboard already, in a way, that people were not thinking enough about enough. They were just kind of running through it and checking the boxes, and so, man, I guess if we had to put something up with our stamp on it, it would be that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Commit thought crime.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I hope this was great for you.
Well, that's it.
All right.